Recording. Here we go. Okay. Hi. Thanks everybody for joining us. This is awesome. This is kind of scary. I've never done this before on Zoom. So please bear with me. But yeah, it's great to see many of you and some familiar faces. So I hope you're all holding up okay during this craziness and keeping yourselves safe and healthy and busy. Yeah, as those of you who are just joining us, it's gonna be, I'd love for you guys to try some stuff and kind of go along with what we're talking about practically. So if you want to turn your videos on, I can help cue and kind of see how you guys are doing a lot better. Yeah, if you've got a space to move, like a yoga mat laid out, that's perfect. Just if you can find kind of enough space on the floor to lie stretched out, that would be awesome. And if you, hopefully this was in the little blurb, but if you happen to be able to grab a dowel or a broom handle, it's not absolutely necessary if you can't find one, but maybe grab one of those if you've got it, and we're gonna use that for some feedback. Okay, let's see. Okay, so my name is Kate. Hello. For those of you who have never met, I used to be a gymnast back in the day for BC. I trained in Vancouver for many years, Coquitlam actually. And then after gymnastics and university gymnastics, I became a physio. And I've been working with, on and off, I guess, for the last 10 years now, man, with gymnasts and with gymnastics clubs as a physiotherapist, and trying to work on, gymnastic specific injury prevention and how to maximize performance and body movement from a gymnastics perspective. And through that, I'll explain how when we get to it, but through working with gymnasts, I was introduced to the Pilates method, which I kind of got completely hooked on, I think mostly because of my background as a gymnast, and just seeing how much it changed how I moved and how much awareness it gave me about my movement, and seeing how it changed movement and helped to prevent injuries and keep athletes safer in the gymnastics world. So I kind of jumped in with both feet into the Pilates world, and now have a Pilates-based physio practice in Fernie, BC. There's not very much gymnastics here in Fernie, BC. There's a lot of biking and skiing and running, but still a lot of active people, and that's what keeps me busy these days. So I'm just gonna share, so what we're gonna do today is talk, hopefully not for that long, about a little bit of theory. I just want to explain why I think this is so helpful and relevant to gymnastics, and give you a little bit of background about Pilates and what we're going to try and achieve with Pilates principles. And then we'll move and try and feel some of these things in ourselves. So let's see if I can remember how to do this. There we go. Okay. Okay. Can we see this okay?
Yes, we sure can. Yeah.
Thank you, Leanne. Oh, how do I move? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this PowerPoint is super not fancy. Sorry. So the Pilates method, for those of you who've never really thought that much about it or been exposed to it, it's basically a series of exercises. It's a repertoire of exercises. It was developed by one man, Joseph Pilates, crazy German man, and during the started in the 30s. So it's a long time ago that this was developed, and it's kind of gone through different phases of perception in popular culture. So it's interesting to dive into it and see what it's really all about. But Joe was really, really interested in movement and was a real movement genius. Like, he never had any formal training, but was super, super intrigued by how animals move, how he watched people move, and he was able to intuit how the body moves optimally and what it needs to be able to move at its best, so that we can kind of get the most out of life. That was his goal, was to get people to move at their best so that they could be comfortable and efficient, and he called it zestful, and get the most out of their jobs and their recreation and their family lives as much as they could. So the exercises that he developed are on a mat without equipment, but he's also got like a whole bunch of different pieces of equipment to help facilitate movement. But all of it together is meant to promote uniformity. So it's meant to promote muscle balance. He really rejected the concept of strengthening pec muscles and, making your superficial muscles really, really dominant and developed. And instead, his goal was to develop everything uniformly, so that nothing was left behind or nothing was doing too much, right? We're using our bodies as they're designed as best as possible. And by doing this, we are hopefully promoting optimal movement, which is obviously what we're looking for in gymnastics training and in injury prevention, both from a performance aspect and from a injury prevention aspect. So I learned about Pilates at a clinic that I was working at like 6 years ago. There was a Pilates therapist there, and I'd never really known that much about it. I never did it as a gymnast. I was kind of intrigued and did a little bit with her, and it felt really cool in my own body. I was finding some different muscles and some awareness of the way that I moved beyond what I'd ever experienced before. And then I was working with some clubs in Calgary at the time and working with their gymnasts. And there was a few gymnasts who were struggling with some injuries that just like nothing helped. It was there were some of those cases that tried everything. All the approaches that I had weren't helping, sent them off to see other practitioners, chiro, massage, sport med, did all the things. Nothing was helping, nothing was changing. And then they tried Pilates. They went to see the Pilates practitioner that I worked with, and that was what changed things. That's what turned them around. And that kind of like ding in my brain, being like, okay, well, this is something that I would like to look into further. And as I kind of got deeper and deeper involved in it, I realized that from my point of view, I think Pilates fills the holes in traditional gymnastics training. We all know, like, the way that gymnasts are trained and conditioned, there are very typical patterns that we see often, very typical patterns of weakness, typical patterns of dominance, and kind of those muscle groups that we always struggle to strengthen. And I found that Pilates was able to bring an awareness to these muscle groups and was actually able to get to them more than anything else I'd ever seen before. Another way of looking at it is, I think gymnasts are really, really motor smart, right? We figure out how to make our body do things without maybe figuring out the best way of doing it, right? Like, from a young age, we're doing really, really, really advanced movements. And our brains just have to figure out how to make it happen. And that's going to happen one way or another, whether that's absolutely optimally done or not, right? And obviously with coaching and stuff, we can catch a lot of that, but some things slip through the cracks and our bodies are left with certain dysfunctions that we are not aware that we have. And I found that for me and for the athletes that I've seen work in Pilates, this brought awareness to those dysfunctions more than anything else that I've ever experienced. Okay, so that's my Pilates buildup. So why? Okay, so we're talking about like patterns of dysfunction and areas of weakness, areas of dominance, right? If we think of the body with 3 layers of muscle, okay? So your deepest layer of muscle is your level 1. And then as you move superficially, closer to the surface, we move through level 2, and then level 3 are your most superficial muscles, okay? So if we look into these muscle types a little bit more in depth, level 3 muscles, so your most superficial muscles, cross multiple joints, okay? That's the key here is they, like, for example, your erector spinae, the muscles that run along the side of your spine, the most superficial layer of these cross like 10 joints, 10 vertebrae, right? You've got muscles that cross your lumbar spine as well as your hip joint. You've got muscles that cross your hip as well as your knee, right? And so these most superficial muscles cross multiple joints, and their job is to shorten and get the origin where they start to the insertion where they finish, regardless of what happens in between, okay? So thinking about in the back, your erectors turning on, and they're crossing 10 joints, they're going to cause extension in the back, regardless of what happens to the 10 vertebrae in between. They don't care, okay? So these are our big mover muscles, obviously, if they're crossing multiple joints and creating large motions. And so there are power muscles. They're phasic, which means that they only turn on when we ask them to, when we demand them to. And so these muscles are recruited by high speed, high load, high coordination, and an open kinetic chain. So when like the end of your kinetic chain is not attached to something. So like a squat is closed kinetic chain, but a tuck jump is an open kinetic chain, okay? So now we go from level 3, we're gonna go deep, 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 and we're gonna go to level 1. So in contrast to level 3, our level 1 muscles only cross one joint as a rule. So think of these as our guide wires, right? So their job basically is to surround the joint. They surround the joint and kind of compress it so that it stays safe and balanced, while the more superficial muscles do all the moving around it, okay? And so these muscles, because they're much smaller, they're more meant for endurance. They're meant to be on at a low level all the time, okay? And their main job, as I kind of alluded to, is to anticipate movement. So they're meant to turn on as our brain thinks about moving, and they turn on to protect that joint that they cross and to keep it balanced, keep it in its neutral, safe position while the bigger power muscles do all the moving around it, right? So we talked about level 3 doesn't care what happens to all the little joints in between. It's level 1's job to keep all of those joints in line and in their safe position while we do these movements, okay? And so also in contrast to the level 3 muscles, level 1 muscles are best recruited by low loads, slow movement, mid-range neutral positioning. Oops, should I do that? Yes. So question from Janice, are these what I've heard referred to as the stabilizing muscles? Yes, absolutely. So guide wires do stabilizing. These are your stabilizing level, okay? So how we actually recruit these muscles and strengthen them and make them become a part of our movement patterns is, yeah, low load, slow movement, mid-range, neutral positioning. That's key here. And closed kinetic chain. So when we're supported and connected to our environment while we're moving. Now, if we think about gymnastics, like what's gymnastics? Gymnastics is this, right? For the most part. Our actual gymnastic skills are very kinetically advanced. They're quick, they're highly coordinated, they are often high speed, high load, high forces. So gymnastics is gonna develop our level 3 muscles, okay? And I think as we learn gymnastics at a young age, right? We learn these advanced movements, and our body has to figure out how to do them. It figures out really well how to get these guys to do their job, but doesn't necessarily recruit these guys, okay? And then I'm gonna argue that the conditioning that we do doesn't demand that we necessarily turn these on ever, okay? And so what I want to do today is give you a framework to kind of help you figure out how to get more of this involved in gymnastics, in your conditioning and your preparation work, so that they are a part of movement patterns and they work to do the stabilizing. They stabilize the spine, they stabilize the pelvis, the hips, the shoulders, as we recruit these power muscles to do all of this highly coordinated movement in gymnastics, okay? I'm gonna keep going. This is weird to do without any kind of feedback, so shoot any questions as you have them, okay, guys? So, oh, that was my, thank you! Okay, so, my main concept that I wanna get across today is the concept of neutral, and primarily in the pelvis and the rib cage, okay? That's what we're gonna talk about, versus the shapes that we often go for in gymnastics, okay? And so these are our, like if we think of a lot of the shapes that we promote in gymnastics and we promote in our conditioning, we do a lot of hollow, right? We do a lot of this planking, and we do a lot of extension. Let me move this over. There we go. Okay. So we learn from a young age to adopt these shapes and to hold them at all costs, right? We make these shapes so strong, okay? And our conditioning promotes this. We do so much hollow body conditioning, we do so much extension conditioning, right? We make these positions so strong. But these shapes aren't, and granted, obviously this is not like the best version of these exercises or positions, but these shapes are not neutral, okay? If we think about the pelvis, okay, now I got a baby belly here, so this doesn't necessarily look normal, but if we think about the pelvis, okay, its neutral shape is slightly tipped forward, okay? We can tuck it under, we can stick it out, but neutral is in the middle, is slightly tipped forward, okay? When we work in hollow over and over and over again, we learn to squeeze our butt and tuck it under and round the low back and make this as bulletproof as possible, right? Now, I'm not saying this is wrong. This is what you need for gymnastics. We need these shapes to be really strong. This is the foundation of gymnastics. what I'm arguing is we need to get out of it at times, okay? Because gymnasts only learn to stabilize their pelvis like this, okay? They have a tucked pelvis all the time. This is the go-to. Anytime that they're challenged at all, they squeeze their butt and they tuck their pelvis under, okay? Now, that's great because it's strong, but this is not promoting balance, okay? If we want balanced muscles around the pelvis, we need to strengthen it in neutral, okay? I'll get to the question in 1 sec. I'm just gonna stay here while I'm up. Now, that's the pelvis. We typically adopt this butt squeezed, tucked pelvis position, okay? I would love to see some work and just some awareness in neutral. Can your athletes stabilize with their pelvis in neutral and not just tucked? Now, as for the rib cage, if we go to the salute the present here on the right? We do a ton of extension. The go-to position for gymnasts in the rib cage, especially for women, not so much for men, but the go-to position in the rib cage is popped like this, okay? So if you imagine my rib cage as a bell, right? It's swung forward a little bit. Neutral is right over top of the pelvis, like so, okay? But this presentation kind of posture presents, sorry, flashing everyone, extension going into a Yurchenko or going into a back walkover, all promote this, okay? So if we can get really good at, first of all, aware of where neutral is in the pelvis and in the ribs, and then strengthen there, you are strengthening the stabilizers, those level 1 muscles, in a uniform way around these regions much, much more effectively than if you're only strengthening like this. Only strengthening like this will only get your level 3s. You need to get out of it and get into neutral to get your level 1s. Okay? We all following so far?
So yeah, the comment just came through that because you have your screen sharing, it's a small video for. So if you do go do the exercise, maybe just like stop the sharing and then we'll put you on the full screen again. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
I didn't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, that's the one I should have read right away. Okay, we'll get back to that. But are we? Yeah. Okay. What else do I have to share here? So let's go. Let's keep moving. So my argument here is that the strengthening shapes only creates a pattern where we are strengthening and promoting blocks of movement, okay? Because we're strengthening these muscles that cross a whole bunch of different joints, right? And so we learn to control them in blocks. We control the pelvis and the hips and the low back all together, right? We control kind of the rib cage, the shoulder blades, and the shoulders all together, okay? We're not great at getting out of those blocks, okay? At going deeper and at being able to control all the little joints that make up those blocks, okay? And so if we only strengthen in blocks, we are decreasing our adaptability, okay? And so you are only able to control those blocks, right? But your body has a whole lot more variability because there are more joints than you as a gymnast are actually controlling. So if we can gain control over those smaller joints, we are increasing our ability to use those joints to our advantage, right? And so this has a performance aspect in that we can make little micro corrections, which is huge in gymnastics, right? Tiny little micro corrections in a handstand, tiny little micro corrections on beam, right, to correct in a split second, right? If we can maximize the number of joints we have control over, then we can micro correct in all of those joints. If we can't micro correct in all of those joints, if we can only work in blocks, then say your handstand starts to tip, you're gonna go. You're not gonna be able to just modify it slightly to bring it back. It's gonna pull that block over and you're gonna go over. Or beam, for example, if your pelvis drops, right, drops to the side, if you can't micro correct in the little pelvic movements and in the hips, that's going to pull you off the beam, okay? This also increases risk of injury because if you are moving only in blocks and then you are still demanding a really high degree of range of motion, right, which obviously gymnastics does, this promotes shearing, okay? So this promotes shearing because there's going to be way too much movement between the blocks, right? Lumbar spine, for example, if your hips and pelvis are one block and then your thorax is another block, and you can only move those guys, right? If you ask for a huge extension, right, in a bridge or something like that, it's only going to happen in the lumbar spine, right? And this is where we get instability in the lumbar spine. Likewise, in the hip, if you can't move your pelvis and your hips independently, but you're asking for a massive split, right? Huge range of motion into a split, then it's going to shear the joint in the hip rather than you being able to control the movement through its full range, the joint through its full range of motion. Okay? So my argument here is I want you to go deeper with your preparation so that you are gaining control over all of those little joints, all those little joints in the body. You have awareness and control over all of them and not just in chunks, okay? And this therefore will make your athletes more adaptable, more able to micro-correct, and less susceptible to injury, okay? So when you send your, yeah, okay, sorry, I'll just keep going. I'm taking too long talking here. Okay, so what I want to do today is give you a little framework. So this is very involved. Like, this is very like deep work, and I totally understand that it takes a long time to figure out, both as a practitioner and a coach and as an athlete. And you don't necessarily have that time. Bright side right now, we're in isolation. We have nothing else to do. So this might be a great time to just start to introduce these principles with your athletes so that then it's not so hard to then integrate them into all of your conditioning, all of your prep, okay? And I'm gonna try and make it just simple so that there's a framework you can apply to every exercise to get a little bit more out of it, okay? And so I want you to think of 3 things as you set up an exercise. And these exercises, as we mentioned before, will be your slowly moving exercises, your low load. So say your beam complex, say your body tension, handstand prep, all of your rehab exercises, whether they are like prescribed by a physio or not, just stuff that you do as a group, all of your rehab exercises can adopt this and you can get more out of them. So the 3 things I want you to think about are: find the neutral position, okay? And today we're going to talk about pelvis and the rib cage. That's it. Number 2 is breath, okay? Find your breath. And number 3 is length. So we'll go into these a little bit. The reason I want you to find neutral is I've just harped on this enough. That will help to engage the level 1 muscles, your stabilizers, okay? So I bet you've heard that from physios. If athletes have problems, they get sent off to physio. Physio sends them back with heel slides and bird dogs, says they can't activate their glutes properly. This is all a stability problem, right? They are not turning on their level 1 muscles appropriately. So we're going to find neutral and build strength there so that those stabilizers are more active. Breathing activates the deepest layer of core stabilizers. So keep hearing core, 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 and especially from a physio when they're talking about core stability, they are talking about a system of 4 muscles, okay? Those 4 muscles are your diaphragm, your breathing muscle. I'm pointing to my ribs here. Your diaphragm sits here. It goes like this to help you breathe, okay? Your pelvic floor. So the muscles basically from your pubic bone to your tailbone that hold everything up. So you've got your diaphragm here. Oh boy, I know I'm small, but this is simple stuff. It'll make me big in a sec. Diaphragm here, pelvic floor here on the bottom, holding everything up. Then your transverse abdominis, the abdominal muscles that wrap around your trunk like a corset, okay? And then some little muscles in your back that stabilize, that are the little guide wires of your spine, okay? So those 4 muscles, diaphragm, pelvic floor, TA, multifidus. We'll kind of ignore those today, but those 4 muscles form a system that keeps your ribs, your pelvis, and helps to keep all of your vertebrae in their neutral, safe position while you use your power muscles and move around them, okay? So that's your deep core stability system. All of those muscles, all 4 of them, are involved in breathing, okay? So if we can breathe with every exercise, then you will be engaging those deep layers of core muscles. Easy as pie, right? And also, if we think of this differently, often with strength exercises, athletes hold their breath to brace, right? That is using pressure. And I'm gonna say, if you're lifting like 400 pounds or something, then you need to brace, okay? But it's not often gymnasts are doing that. So in their conditioning, if they can learn to breathe and use breath to drive the motion, then they are going to be using that deep layer of core and actively stabilizing their trunk rather than using pressure to stabilize it, okay? Then finally, length. So if we can think of length through the spine mostly, but I mean through the entire body, we are creating space between all of those little joints that I've been talking about, okay, that we're trying to access and learn how to control. And so if we create space, it's much easier, to bring awareness to each of those levels, each joint, and therefore to control them. Okay, and you'll see what I mean by that. Okay, that is all I have for notes. Before we try stuff, does anybody have any questions? I see some head shaking. Good, thanks, John. Okay. I think if I'm not sharing my screen and I'm talking, am I big? Can you guys all see me better now?
You are big, yes.
Okay, thank you again. Okay, And I can, if you guys want those notes, I will send them to Leanne, and if you want them, she can give them out to you after. Okay, now, can I get everybody to lie down on your backs, please? Okay, I do. So, okay, flat on the back. I'm gonna lie with my legs bent, feet flat. Okay? Just let everything kind of be heavy on the mat. Okay? Just let everything melt. Our first step when setting up an exercise, right, was find neutral. Okay? So, we're gonna start with the pelvis. So what I want you to do is just tuck your bum, tip your pelvis, if your pelvis is a bowl, tip it backwards, okay? And then tip it forwards. Tip it backwards, tip it forwards, okay? And try not to move the back, the ribs as much as you can. Leave them just relaxed. Try and isolate it to the pelvis as much as you can. We're tucking under, we're sticking your butt out. I want you to do that one more time. Tuck your butt, stick your bum out. Now I want you to find the middle. Stop in the middle, okay? And so lying on your back with your feet flat, this should be pretty relaxed because your pelvis should be supported in neutral. And what I want you to feel is your sacrum, that triangle bone at the base of your spine, kind of in the middle of your pelvis. Your sacrum is heavy on the ground, okay? Your low back is relaxed, and you can maybe slide a hand under there. That's okay. Totally okay. I know that's a hard thing to grasp because we are constantly like this, getting rid of that lumbar curve. But your back is built with a lumbar curve, so if we're talking about neutral, you want it. A little bit of a lumbar curve. So, pelvis is neutral, lumbar curve is relaxed. Now, let's come on up to your ribs, okay? And I want you to try the same thing in your ribs. It's kind of awkward on your back, but see if you can pop your ribs forward. As I mentioned, like that bell. Ring your bell forward, and then ring your bell back. And that's kind of awkward, but just kind of move it back and forth. And then I want you to, again, find the middle, okay? And now this might change as we breathe, as you'll see, but just kind of try and let the back of the ribs be as heavy as possible on the ground, okay? So now sacrum is on the ground, back of the ribs are on the ground. Pelvis is in neutral, so are the ribs, okay? What was step 2? Step 2 was breathing. So we're gonna breathe into the rib cage. So I want you to put one hand on your ribs, one hand on your belly. Take a couple breaths and see what hand moves, okay? They don't have to be massive breaths, but just try and notice where the air goes, okay? Does your belly hand move? Or does your rib hand move? Okay, and for our intents and purposes, I'm gonna get up and look. I want your rib hand to move more, okay? There's many, many different ways of changing your breath pattern and for many different reasons. For what we're gonna do today, I want you to breathe into your rib cage. Okay, so now take your belly hand and put it behind your back, about the same level as your rib hand, okay? So you've got one hand on your, like, just underneath, well, sternum, other hand on your back, just straight on the other side. Now I want you to breathe into your backhand. See if you can direct the air into the back of the rib cage and breathe. We got some good pet issues over here. Breathe into that hand on your back, okay? And if you do that, can you feel a little expansion in your mid-back? Hopefully. So expansion through this part of your back, maybe some length, maybe a little bit of growth. Can you feel that changing? Hopefully. Okay. Okay, nice work, you guys. So what I want you to do as you breathe in, obviously, is fill the rib cage up three-dimensionally, like it's a balloon. Imagine there's a balloon in your rib cage and you're filling it up front, side, and back, okay? And then you let the balloon just deflate nice and evenly. So try that again. Breathe in, fill up the bottom of the rib cage, front, side, and back. Exhale, let it deflate. Yes, okay, I'm seeing some good stuff. Good job, you guys. One more. Inhale into the bottom of the rib cage. Feel it expand. Exhale, let it deflate. Okay, now we're gonna add just a little abs on the exhale. All I want you to do, super, super gentle, is gently draw your belly button down as you exhale, okay? So breathe in, fill the bottom of the ribs, feel the ribs expand. Exhale, let the ribs deflate, gently draw the belly button down. Inhale, fill the ribs up three-dimensionally, especially the back. Exhale, let the ribs deflate, draw the belly button down. Good job, you guys. Okay, now, third step was length, right? And you can use breath to find that length. So all I want you to do here is, as you breathe and fill your rib cage three-dimensionally, feel like you're growing out the top of your head so your spine is getting longer at the same time, okay? Just a little bit, obviously. So inhale, breathe into the back of your ribs, feel your spine lengthen out the top of your head. Exhale, stay nice and long, draw your belly button down. We're gonna do two more. Inhale, fill up the rib cage, make it heavy on the ground, lengthen out the top of your head. Exhale, draw your belly button down. Cool, okay. So as you do that, hopefully you feel your spine kind of getting longer, your ribs maybe getting heavier on the ground. And that's what we want. That's finding our space, first of all. So neutral, breath, length. Now, let's just add a really, really simple movement. I'm gonna get you to bring your arms over your head. So you're gonna start with your arms at 90. And then you're gonna bring them up over your head as you inhale. And then as you exhale, bring them back. Sorry, I'm skipping stuff, aren't I? Okay. Take one quick sec. Stick your butt out, tuck your bum under, find neutral in your pelvis. Make the back of your ribs heavy on the ground. Now, keep those two spots there as you bring your arms up over your head. Inhale, up over your head. Exhale, come back. Okay, inhale. And notice as you bring your arms up, that maybe your ribs want to do this. They want to pop, right? It's harder to keep the back of the rib cage on the floor as your arms come up, right? So go nice and slow so that you can feel it and control it. Breathe into the back of your ribs, make them heavy. Exhale, bring the arms back. Inhale, breathe into the back of your ribs, get longer as your arms go up over your head. Exhale, bring your arms back, bring your belly button down. Inhale, arms up over your head. Ribs are heavy. Exhale, bring your arms back. Belly button comes down. Can you do one more for me? Inhale, arms up over your head. Ribs are heavy. Exhale, the arms come back. The belly button comes down. Yeah, cool. Okay, so relax your arms. So notice how when you do that, it kind of, you're working on shoulder range, right? But maybe, hopefully, you feel a little activity in here. You feel kind of a deep layer of core working to control your rib cage, right? So this bonus, you can make anything a core exercise if you think of it like this. Thanks, John. I appreciate the thumbs up. Okay, so that was just arms, nice and easy. We'll come back to arms in a little bit. What I want you to do now is we're gonna do a crunch, okay? And let's apply this concept to a crunch. So, can you put your hand, stay on your back, put your hands behind your head. Bring your elbows forward. Okay. What we're gonna do is curl your head and shoulders off the ground, just like your average crunch. But I want to see if you can do it one vertebra at a time, okay? So working from the head into the neck, into the upper back, feel one vertebra coming up off the ground at a time, and then roll back down one at a time. Yeah, try that a couple times. See if you can get some separation in the upper back. Feel each of those vertebrae. I'm not doing this one, I'm sorry. In through the back, the upper back. Exhale, stay long through the upper back. Bring the belly button down. Last breath. Lengthen, lengthen, lengthen your spine out the top of your head. Draw the belly button down to maintain that length, and then come down one little bit at a time. Nice! Okay, guys. Now, did that feel different than your average crunch? Did you get into, okay, seeing some nods, good. Did you get into some different feelings in the core? Maybe a little shakes, maybe some shakes. Grammar is terrible today. Okay, so that's just an example of what using your breath and finding length will do in an exercise like a crunch, okay? We are all too good at just using pecs and six packs to do a crunch, okay? But that is working in a block, okay? This way helps you to get into all of those vertebrae here, right? And use your abdominals to control them, right? Slowly getting out of that block system by using some length. Okay, now I have a challenge for you guys. Lie down on your backs again, straighten out your legs for me. Okay, and you're like, ooh, you have to use momentum, or there's a moment where your legs come off the ground. That's where you've lost that segmental abdominal control, okay? That's where you're reverting back to your block system, okay? So this is a kind of a good check-in and a good exercise to work your way up to. If we'll go over this next week, but if your athletes can't do this without like using huge momentum or without their legs coming flailing off the ground, then there's progressions that you can use. But this is a really great way to get into those deep segmental muscles. Okay, so let's apply this to a traditional gymnastics exercise. One more ab thing, and then we'll give your abs a break. Can you go on your back, keep your legs straight? We're gonna do hollow rocks, but we're gonna change them a little bit. So I want you to start with your arms at 90. Okay, and then I want you to check in with the back of your ribs. Are they heavy on the ground? Okay, now keep your ribs nice and heavy on the ground as you bring your arms up over your head. Reach long into your fingers. Okay, nice. Now, are your ribs still on the ground? Take a breath to check in with them. Inhale into the back of your ribs so they get heavier. Exhale, draw your belly button down to help to keep them there. Okay, nice. Now, keep your ears between your arms. I want you to curl up through the ribs, one vertebra at a time. Don't let your head poke forward. Don't let your shoulders flex. Keep your arms vertical and curl through your ribs. Good job, you guys. Take a breath into the back of your ribs. Lengthen out your hands. Good. Now try and maintain that shape. Lengthen out your legs, let them lift, and we're gonna do a couple hollow rocks. So try and go through a hollow rock and maintain that length through the upper back. Breathe, inhaling to lengthen the spine, exhaling to draw the belly button down. Find length into your fingertips, length into your feet. Good, and you can relax whenever you want to, but did that feel different? Is it harder? Okay. Okay, good, yay, okay, that's awesome. So notice just how just bringing awareness to a couple small things, right, totally changes the exercise, right? So your kids won't be able to do 30 rocks like that. That's, I don't know who can. That's super, super hard. But this is a great way to just change it a little bit, bring them out of their normal comfort zone, their super, super strong hollow position, and make them longer and more segmentally controlled, and you're gonna get something completely different out of it, okay? Okay, let's flip over. Leanne, am I okay going over a little bit?
Yeah, we've got a little bit of a buffer time. No more than hopefully 15 or 20 minutes if possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. And if anybody needs to leave, go for it. Can you go on your tummy now? Lie on your tummy. Okay, so let's start with your arms over your head again. Face down, sorry, not the best. If you really want to, put something under your forehead so that you can have space for your nose. But now, lengthen out your fingertips, lengthen out your feet. And let's just breathe here a little bit. See where everything likes to be. So breathe into the back of your ribs, lengthen through the back of your ribs and out into your fingertips. Then exhale, draw your belly button up away from the ground just a little bit. Make sure your butt's not clenched. Unsqueeze your butt. And then take a couple more breaths just to check in. Make sure your ribs are not smushing into the floor, and the front of your ribs, I mean. So breathe into the back of your ribs, grow through your spine, out the top of your head. Stay tall on the exhale, draw the belly button up away from the ground. One more breath. Okay, now without changing your rib or pelvic position, I want you to lift your arms up off the ground on the exhale. So take a breath in, be nice and long. Exhale, draw your belly button up away from the ground, lift your arms. Good, hold them there and breathe. Inhale, lengthen out the top of your head. Exhale, lift your belly button. So not lifting your chest, just your arms. Your head stays down. You stay super, super long. Lengthen out your fingertips. Cool. Okay, and then come on back down. So how many of you smushed your face into the ground to get your arms up? Did anybody notice it was really hard to keep breathing into your back while you were doing that? Right? Because we tend to use blocks again. Smush your neck forward. If your back is saggy, it might not be the lumbar spine's fault, it might be the ribs' fault, right? So let's check in with your rib cage. So we're gonna just tip the rib cage back, tip the rib cage forward, like you're ringing a bell. Tip the rib cage back. Now find the middle. And the middle should be where the back of your ribs, sorry. The back of your ribs are on the stick. Bring your other leg back. Sacrum, ribs, head, still on the stick. I've lost my head, so I'm going to do this. Keep breathing for me here. Lengthen through your ribs and out the top of your head. Exhale, draw your belly button up towards your spine. Stay there for 2 more breaths. Lengthen into your heels and out the top of your head. I see some round backs. Make them flatter and longer. One more breath. Lengthen through the spine, out the top of the head. Exhale, draw the belly button up away from the floor. And then come on down onto your knees, relax. Nice. Okay. Now again, did that feel different to anybody from your typical plank? Me, not as enthusiastic as Ross. So I'm going to show you here. What we typically do in a plank as gymnasts is hollow, right? Round back, protracted shoulders, butt tucked, right? And okay, we can stay here all day. That's great. But now, what happens if we take that shape out of it and we go into neutral and try and hold it? So we untuck the butt, we lengthen through the spine, we find neutral and we breathe. Okay? Then it becomes a whole different beast. Do you guys want to try that way without the stick? Because the stick can be annoying. Just do one more plank for me. So go on your elbows. Find a plank however you normally do it. Okay, now reach your heels back. Get a little calf stretch. So reach back into your hips to heels. Nice. Okay, now unclench your butt. I know that's counterintuitive as gymnasts, but unclench your butt. See what happens. Breathe into the whole rib cage. Expand the whole rib cage, front, side, and back, but especially the back. Yes. And then on the exhale, draw the belly button up away from the ground towards your spine. Take 2 more breaths there. Get longer on the inhale. Exhale, draw the belly button up away from the ground. Make yourself as long as possible from your heels to the top of your head. And then exhale, stay long, and then come down. Nice. Okay, that was good. I saw some differences there. Hopefully you felt something different. Bonus if you got the shakes. Okay, so once again, typical exercise, but we put the pelvis and the ribs in neutral. We find breath, and we find length, and it changes it, right? It's a different exercise, okay? So I'm just saying if you can incorporate some of this into your injury prevention and your conditioning with your athletes, you're gonna get a whole lot more out of all of these exercises that you've always done, right? And extra bonus, your athletes are gonna build awareness as well, right? Because it's really important for them to know where their pelvis is, right? You can't just do. Does your bum want to tuck? Do you lose your sacrum? Do your ribs want to stick out? Do you lose them on the stick? Like, where does your body want to go? And use the stick to give yourself some feedback to keep everything in neutral. Okay, so try a couple more for me. Now, I want you to add breath. Inhale as you hinge. Exhale to stand back up again. Inhale to hinge. Lengthen through the ribs and out the top of the head. Exhale to stand back up. Inhale, lengthen through the spine. Exhale, draw your belly button in to stand back up. Good. Okay. Hopefully you can feel some activation in the back of your butt, back of your hips and your hamstrings, okay? That is typically a really hard area for gymnasts to strengthen because they like to be like this, okay? If you ask a gymnast to do that, they're gonna do this. They're gonna keep their butt tucked and they're not actually gonna use their glutes, okay? If you can find neutral, hinge at the hips, and you stand up again, then you're gonna get into those deeper layers of hip stabilizers, also, which commonly lump together into your glutes, okay? And those are really, really key. Stick on sacrum, ribs, and head. Shift onto one leg. And then do the same thing. Okay? Keeping your pelvis, your shoulders, your ribs square to the ground, and just hinging at the hip. That's it. Don't lose any of these spots on the stick. Okay? So what's that? That's a layout step out landing, right? But can you feel how the stick kind of gives you that extra feedback? And by putting your pelvis, your ribs, your head in the right positions, it forces you to move better, differently at least. Yeah? So what I wanted to do today was just practice those 3 concepts: neutral, breath, and length. Okay? And I didn't do a great job getting into any other exercises, but I want you to try on your own. So whenever you're doing like slow, not when you're doing, I watched Heather's presentation a couple of weeks ago, super, super quick, going for power, going for agility, right? That's not the time to think about this. And I mean, way, way later, that's advanced, right? Ideally, you can, but that's not the place to introduce this stuff. If you're doing your rehab exercises, if you got them, say your bird dogs, your heel slides, your planks, try and incorporate those 3 principles: neutral, breath, length, and see what it does. See how it changes your movement, okay? And then see if you can start to kind of conceptualize how you can do this with your athletes, right? How you can introduce these principles so that they can feel some new things in their bodies. We've got another Zoom meeting next week set up, and there we're not going to do any theory. We're just going to go through 10 exercises that you can do with your athletes now, so that you can introduce to them. They can practice them now at home and get used to moving intentionally like this, or get used to kind of checking into these areas of their body in this way. But if you want to try this on your own this week first, just so it makes a little bit more sense in your head, try practicing just setting up with those 3 things, okay? Okay, let's leave it there because I pushed my time quite a bit. But if, do we have time for questions?
We've probably got a couple of minutes if anybody has a quick question to come through. Otherwise, you can always send me an email to coaching@gymbc.org, and I can connect you with Kate after the fact too. So
yes.
Yeah, so we'll just leave it a second. If any questions, please type them in the chat box now. I'll give you a minute.
Pretty all good, it seems. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so I'll send the super not fancy PowerPoint to Leanne, and then if you have any questions, please do shoot them to her, or I'll just send you my email address, Leanne, and then you guys can feel free to email me. Cool?
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Kate, for leading our session today. We really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, and as she mentioned, she'll be joining us again next week on Friday, so make sure to register for that course online if you wanted to attend. In the email invite that I sent out to you guys today with the Zoom information, there is a post-webinar survey as well, so if you wanted to submit some feedback to us as far as how the session went today or potential upcoming sessions,